Welcome to Dinar Trend Tracker channel. You can rely on this source to get the straight scoop on the Iraqi dinar and its arduous revaluation process. The RV storyline that many of us have been clinging to had its foundations shook by a big and, to be honest, extremely disheartening development. Everyone, the headline says it all, it's a devastating blow. There was a heavy toll in Iraq. The prospect of a dinar revaluation in the near future is dashed due to U.S. sanctions. There are more than a few new regulations at play here. Here, the United States is referring to aggressive, targeted measures. That highlights a huge systemic issue in Baghdad that needs fixing before the dinar can be seriously considered for internationalization. The present Iraqi government sincerely regrets the recent U.S. sanctions imposed on certain Iraqi firms, such as the Mohannides General Company. The financial disaster this is igniting is enormously exaggerated. But let's get one thing straight. Anyone counting on an instant dinar army should see the re-sanctions of Iraqi assets as a warning sign that President Trump and the present U.S. Treasury are not messing about with the world's financial system. Does the intricate web of difficulties that Iraq is attempting to resolve, which extends well beyond the manufacturing of new currency, begin to become apparent to you? Iraq has been unable to make the necessary reforms to rejoin the World Trade Organization, WTO, and have its currency freely traded on major international platforms like Forex due to its history of illegal behavior and apparent incapacity to control illicit financial flows. In view of these ongoing financial and governmental setbacks, the excitement and hope surrounding a near-term RV, particularly from some quarters of the community, requires a severe dose of reality. Given the mounting pressure from Washington, it is clear that a high-value revaluation of the dinar will not be happening anytime soon. Any reasonable timeline now looks to be at least a year or two off, depending on how seriously Baghdad decides to clean house. Sanctions bring to light the fact that Iraq has never been able to attain the non-negotiable condition for international currency status, true financial autonomy and transparency. Companies aren't being singled out at random by the U.S. Treasury. Their targets include organizations that have been implicated in the corruption and illegal activities that drain Iraq's economy and give foreign powers too much power. What this circumstance is trying to convey is that the international community does not trust Iraq's financial ecosystem because of its pollution. The United States government will maintain its financial sanctions on Iraq as long as it detects disobedience, thereby halting the dinar's rise in global value. As long as the Iraqi central bank has access to its dollar, compliance, not conspiracy, is at the heart of this. There has been much talk about Iraq being ready for the big economic reveal, eliminating corruption, and conforming to international standards for quite some time. The present Iraqi administration is either unable or unwilling to completely address a long-standing issue, which is brought to light every few months by a fresh wave of sanctions or limits on dollar transfers. Actually, how people view Iraq's government and how seriously it takes global financial rules are directly related to the dinar's actual worth. A chilling message is sent to the whole international banking sector when large Iraqi companies are blacklisted for alleged links to illegal activity or for evading global anti-money laundering measures. These enterprises represent the lifeblood of the Iraqi economy. Proceed with utmost care while dealing with the Iraqi dinar. A tangible feeling of economic stagnation and political gridlock has replaced optimism, and the RV event horizon has been pushed further away by this reality. Consider the steps involved in a genuine revaluation of the dinar. This is more than the flip of a switch. For a currency to be completely trusted on the international market, it takes years of structural transformation, clear laws, and transparent finances. The latest sanctions prove that the safeguards for this trust are severely inadequate. There has been a clear breakdown in law enforcement at the top echelons of government when companies like Mohannides General Company and others mentioned in recent Treasury actions are involved. The restoration of the dinar's status as a sovereign and marketable currency, as well as the trust of big foreign investors, are both negatively impacted by this institutional weakness. This is too important to ignore. Anyone claiming otherwise is obviously not looking at the numbers. These punishments have a direct and quantifiable negative impact on the timeframe. Brace yourself for impact. This isn't a buy-the-dip moment. The economic stability needed for any revaluation of the dinar is being undermined by the political maneuvering in Baghdad, which is frequently motivated by conflicting internal and external interests. The United States Treasury isn't doing anything alone. They are taking action because they believe Iraq's dollar transfer systems are being systematically abused, which affects the country's ability to sell oil and run its economy. Anytime this system is taken advantage of, it just makes people distrust it more and forces Washington to step in harder. This geopolitical and economic reality is making the utopian dream of an RV appearing out of nowhere look more and more like a pipe dream. We need to shift our attention from optimistic rumors to real, visible progress, which is now lacking. The Iraqi Central Bank, CBI, is under tremendous strain, and its independence and effectiveness they can't seem to get out of this jam. The international calls for complete transparency, and the domestic political groups that are opposed to complying. Restricting the flow of cash shows that the U.S. side doesn't feel the CBI has full control over their destination. The tap will stay restricted as long as there is a substantial risk of currency being diverted to sanctioned entities or malicious activities. There can be no free-floating, high-value dinar with this currency restriction, which puts a heavy deflationary strain on the Iraqi economy as a whole. Evaluate what is necessary to rejoin the WDO. Intellectual property rights, complete financial transparency, and strict adherence to international trade regulations are essential. At the same time that the United States is labeling important Iraqi economic entities as non-compliant and sanctioning them, how is Iraq supposed to finish its WDO accession? Both of these paths are completely at odds with one another. Sanctions provide concrete proof that internal corruption and a lack of political will are causing the compliance track to be derailed. The U.S. Treasury is definitely targeting the old guard and illicit networks, and it appears that they are preventing the planned transition to a completely contemporary, transparent financial system from happening. The main reason the RV clock has been stopped, if not turned backwards, is because of this structural collision. We must realize that this is a global issue, not limited to Iraq. This issue with financial integrity is widespread. The international banking community must be certain that the dinar will not be used for illicit purposes like as money laundering or financing if it is traded globally. Sanctions imposed by the United States are a clear indication that the country considers this risk to be excessive. In Baghdad, people are starting to lose faith in the stability of the dinar and the government's currency management skills as the difference between the official and parallel market exchange rates continues to expand. The worst possible time to start a devaluation of a valuable currency is when the economy is in shambles and people lose faith in it. Revaluation, in which the dinar is repegged at a much higher value, depends on strong economic fundamentals and international recognition, both of which are being weakened by these sanctions. It is critical to have a financial climate that is stable, predictable, and compliant. Talks of a near-term RV are mere wishful thinking, as the volatility and non-compliance are highlighted by the ongoing implementation of sanctions. Instead of empty rhetoric, Iraq must show that it is serious about implementing long-term financial reforms. Full alignment of their banking system with international anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism funding norms is necessary, as is the United States will start removing the constraints that are limiting the dinar's potential only after that. As a whole, this circumstance calls for investors to have a lot more practical perspective. The idea of a fast RV, like a lottery ticket, takes attention away from the difficult but necessary reforms that Iraq must undergo in the long run. The United States isn't the only important country keeping an eye on Iraq to see how it handles this issue. What they thought about these punishments, any potential future appreciation of the dinar will depend on how seriously they tackle the fundamental problems, as opposed to merely expressing token protests. The dinar's risk profile is quite high and RV prospects are diminished until there are decisive, irreversible steps taken against sanctioned entities and the corrupt mechanisms that enabled them to thrive. Although I can empathize with the irritation, ultimately, rational thought must triumph over emotion. The United States has a long tradition of employing financial sanctions as a major instrument of foreign policy, and these penalties have shown to be an effective means of isolating economies that do not fulfill its expectations. The most recent and compelling proof that Iraq has failed to meet those criteria is the imposition of sanctions on Iraqi firms. The dinar will stay where it is until the pressure is lifted, which is a determined and intentional effort to get people to do what the government wants. Thus, although there is still promise in the long run, the increased geopolitical and financial pressure has certainly lowered the short-term prospects. The larger picture of Iraq's economy, which is heavily reliant on oil, must also be considered. A high revalued rate for the dinar can only be maintained if the country's economy is diversified and a thriving non-oil private sector is established, which can produce sustainable non-dollar revenue. Reports indicate that sanctioned entities frequently impede diversification efforts through corrupt tactics or lawful money flight channels. To summarize, the penalties extend beyond a purely political issue. To build a strong, revalued currency, essential structural adjustments are required, and they stand in the way of these changes. Realistically, the 2-year minimum delay recognizes the necessity to fix the underlying causes. Despite expressing remorse for the sanctions, the Iraqi government has not done enough to address the seriousness of the issue. Neither foreign investors nor the U.S. Treasury will be reassured that real change is taking place by this diplomatic language. We need a bold, open, and decisive crackdown on the banks and people who are helping to fund illicit financial activities. Until an unwavering, high-profile effort is initiated, the United States will maintain its sanctions against the dinar, effectively halting its global potential forever. Baghdad needs to realize how urgent it is since the opportunity for a speedy turnaround is closing fast. Focus on the big picture. This isn't about vengeance, it's about the international monetary system. The United States will vigorously defend the dollar-based system because it is the custodian of the world's principal reserve currency. If any nation, including Iraq, is found to be aiding in the overthrow of this system, dire repercussions will ensue. We interpret this as meaning that Iraq's internal battles against corruption and financial indiscipline have left the dinar tied to a low-value exchange rate. Iraq obviously hasn't made it to the point where it deserves the RV, which is awarded to nations that have undergone genuine transformation. Lastly, this must be the takeaway for everyone who has been following the Dinar RV story. Present economic and geopolitical circumstances do not lend credence to the notion that a revaluation is on the horizon. An indisputable and powerful factor delaying the schedule is the U.S. sanctions. We must keep our enthusiasm in check and face reality. The road ahead is more winding and challenging than what many experts had anticipated. Pay special attention to the political will in Baghdad, keep a watch on the CBI's compliance efforts, and concentrate on the structural reforms. The truth will remain in the headline until those pillars are solid. There will be no revaluation of the dinar anytime soon due to U.S. sanctions. If you want to know more about the particular banking rules that are currently under fire, you'll have to wait for our next update.